Today we're going to talk about how to make the best P90 class setup possible. We're going to talk about some various attachments, recoil pattern, time to kill, and we're going to see how it compares to the top SMGs within Warzone and if it actually has a place in the meta. If you enjoyed the video or learned something new, please do me a favor hitting that like button. I do have a goal on today's video of 2,000 likes, so hopefully we can hit that number as you guys have been crushing it. And if you're brand new looking to find your way back for more Call of Duty content, definitely make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. And if you're looking for more people to play Warzone with, I would definitely check out the community Discord, which is over 4,100 members and a lot of people partying up on a regular basis and getting wins within Warzone. So definitely check that out. It's one of the first links down in the description. So the first thing we'll go ahead and talk about is the recoil pattern. If you guys have seen the other videos, you guys have kind of seen how the recoil patterns look. I wanted to kind of try and find a new space, so I went looking around all the different maps and I found a sightline that's a little bit better, where it's further away from a wall and it has a clean line of sight where I can go ahead and check that out. And pretty much all I did is just lined up right here. As soon as I ADS fully and then I pull the trigger and whatever happens, happens. I'm not adjusting for any kind of aim. And then pretty much I take a screenshot of it in the exact same spot. And then you end up with what we're going to see right now. This is what we end up getting when I do that over and over. Take the screenshots, mark the little different bullet holes, and then put them side by side for comparison. And if this is your first time actually to the channel, what I have right here at the top left is that's how long it takes for the gun to aim down sight the base weapon without any attachments added. And you can see the recoil is pretty straightforward. I started from that bottom left like I showed, and then it pretty much just goes up and to the right. Very tight for the most part. It kind of has a little bit of bounce as far as spacing between the shots. Overall, relatively easy recoil to manage. You basically just pull down and slightly to the left, and it should be very easy to control even at further ranges. Next up, we got the muzzle brake. It is 4 milliseconds slower, so just a little bit slower. And you can see that there is a noticeable difference. It pulls it down a little bit, so maybe you don't need to pull down quite as hard. Same thing with the compensator. Typically, the compensator is probably one of the best attachments overall. A lot of times you combine that with the commando foregrip because you're getting the vertical reduction and then getting rid of the side to side when you use the commando, and that usually tightens it up quite a bit for probably about 90% of the weapons. In this particular case, we're getting a significant reduction in magnitude, so you can see it's pretty much just shortening it up and getting these bullets a little bit tighter together. On top of that, if we go with the forged tack barrel, which is the longer barrel, we're going to get a 37 milliseconds slower aim down sight, which is pretty considerable. You could always swap that out for the other barrel, which we'll talk to you about once we get to the barrels. You can see that you are getting some benefit, but it's nowhere close to what we're getting with the compensator. And when it comes to the stippled front, you can see we're getting 17 milliseconds slower aim down sight, and the overall magnitude of the recoil is shrinking up quite a bit there. Rubberized front, you can see we're getting a similar benefit, but it does kind of have a little bit of a kick left and a kick right. So if I had to choose between the two, I'd probably go with the stippled front just based off the visual, but overall it's fairly even because you're not really seeing this part until you get to the 45th shot, which normally you're not going to just full spray and pray the entire magazine. Rubberized grip, you can see that we are getting that on the rear where it is getting a little bit of recoil control. It is benefiting slightly, but obviously there's no penalty there. So it's one of the better attachments as far as not actually giving you a con while it's giving you a benefit. And then the overall lowest recoil, which we'll talk about, isn't always practical because the whole benefit of having an SMG is you want that faster aim down sight time to compete with those rifles at the closer ranges. Obviously, when you get into rifles with all their different various attachments, they're talking about 300, 325 millisecond aim down sight time, and that extra 70 milliseconds a lot of times can make up for the time to kill. And obviously we're going to talk about those types of things when we get into the overall damage. So what I thought I'd do is kind of take it a little bit of a different approach when it comes to the overall ranking of the weapon. I went and took all the different SMGs and I took their ADS speeds. This is the base ADS speed without any of the attachments, and you can see right here they're all the various numbers, and then I went and ranked them. The best aim down sight time is for the Uzi, and even though it doesn't have the fastest time to kill, its one benefit here is that it has a very fast aim down sight time. What we're looking at when it comes to the P90, it ends up being kind of one of those middle of the road, jack of all trade type of weapons. It doesn't really do well in anything, but it doesn't do bad in anything either. The Fennec or the Vector would probably be the number one SMG in my opinion if it had more ammo. The biggest issue is that ammo situation where even with extended mags, you're only getting 40 bullets, and with the lower damage, it's not really allowing it to compete. The benefit with the P90, it already comes built in with the 50 round mag and still deals considerable amount of damage. So when we're looking at these various ones, fire rate, it's still pretty competitive there. It's really only behind the MP7 and the Vector. And then when we get a little bit further out, the DPS is calculated basically by looking at the overall damage to the chest. This is where this numbers comes from, because there's different limb damage and then also headshot damage. But when it comes to the chest shot damage, we're keeping it consistent here. We're just looking at the overall damage per second, and this will kind of give you an idea of how it works when the health isn't exactly 100. So if somebody has 1 plate, 2 plates, or fully plated with 3 plates. And then we'll get a TTK based off of that if they were fully plated and how that converts out. And when we get all that information together, we can kind of see how it performs. It ends up having a fairly competitive compared to these other ones, still ranked 4th. And once the damage drops off, you can see that the time to kill kind of drops off quite a bit, while some of the other ones still perform slightly better. And right here on the right side, you can see that its average rank is 4th. So it's definitely better than some of these other weapons, and it could probably compete with these top tier weapons, but there's definitely going to be situations where you're probably going to be outgunned. And I think that'll be a little bit more visible once we put that to the graph. So taking the overall time to kill versus distance within Warzone for the P90 and the top 3 SMGs, I end up with this particular graph. So the numbers on the left are the time in milliseconds, and the numbers on the bottom are the distance in meters. So when it comes to the time on the left, you want this number to be as low as possible. So these numbers right here, this red and blue line, have the fastest time to kill up close. And these other two, the green and the yellow, are the slower times to kill. So these two on the bottom will win a gunfight against the top 2 if they're both hitting their shots to the chest. And as we get further out, you can see that the time to kill increases dramatically and ends up being uncompetitive at the further ranges. And that's why typically you're going to use a rifle beyond about 30 meters, where almost all the weapons have dropped off. If we do look at the Fennec or the Vector, you can see the blue line, it's very competitive, pretty much dominates the entire SMG category. But again, like I mentioned, the issue is that ammo capacity. What happens right here is the P90 is the least competitive out of these 3 up close, but you can see right around 12.5 meters up to about 17 meters, you can see that it does have a relatively good time to kill and better than the MP7 and the MP5. And as you can see, right around 27 meters is kind of where the P90 is kind of its strongest compared to the other SMGs. But obviously when you get into those types of engagements, you'd probably be using a rifle or a long range weapon. One thing I did want to show that's kind of a little bit funny, I end up throwing in the M4A1 in there. And what you'll notice is the time to kill is better than the P90. So pretty much if you have an M4, there's no reason to ever run the P90 unless you want that extra mobility or faster aim down sight time, which are both incredibly important when it comes to a close quarters engagement. So that's just kind of one of the trade-offs. I thought I'd throw that in there just to show you why you should be using a rifle once you get beyond that 20 meter range, just because in terms of time to kill, it's not even close. And on top of that, the M4, you can land a bullet in the toe, in the arm, in the upper chest. It doesn't matter. It's going to have the same time to kill. The only exception is if you land a headshot. Just something to keep in mind when you're building your class setups. You're like, well, I want something probably for up to about 17 meters. And then everything beyond 17 meters, I'm going to use my M4 for. Just some kind of thought process, since normally you're going to be stacking 2 primary weapons together, regardless if you do an overkill class setup or 2 ghost class setups. So is the P90 going to ever be a part of the meta? I don't really think it will be. I think you can have a little bit of fun with it, mix it up. You're not going to be at a significant disadvantage if you decide to run the P90, as long as you're aware of its strengths and its weaknesses. So one of the cool things with this one over some of the other weapons in the game is this is one of the few weapons I will actually use stopping power with. Usually I'll use it maybe on the MP7, maybe on the M13. There's only a handful of weapons I would actually use stopping power with, because it doesn't really work like we've seen in previous Call of Duties. A lot of times in previous Call of Duties, you would just equip it and you would kill people faster. And that's how it worked. In this particular COD, it doesn't always give you a faster time to kill. It depends on where you hit the target. And in addition to that, it has a huge downside, just like a lot of the other stuff in the game. There's a plus that's coming. There's also going to be some kind of negative. In this one, you end up getting twice as much or even 3 times as much recoil. So you can really only equip it on weapons that are going to have very low recoil to begin with. Maybe a kilo is another one to throw in that. But overall, that's something you should consider, because with this weapon and stopping power up close, you're going to melt the enemy. They're going to feel like they got hit by a shotgun. So it's just something to consider if you do decide to run the P90. So when it comes to Warzone, this is the class setup I would use, and this is the one that was shown off in the gameplay. I would use the Pro Barrel over the Forged Tech, primarily because the aim down sight speed difference is significant. And on top of that, this was going to help with recoil control, which we saw doesn't help out a ton. But with this weapon having low recoil to begin with, as far as manageable recoil, I think it's fine to go ahead and go with a Pro Barrel over the Forged Tech Retribution. But obviously, if you have preference, you can go that route. If you wanted to make up for this, maybe run the Forged Tech because you do struggle with the recoil in Warzone. Maybe you go with the, instead of the monolithic, you're going to go with the tactical suppressor. Just keep it in mind, you're not getting that extra meter or two boost that you would get with the monolithic suppressor. But you get a little bit faster aim down sight speed compared to the monolithic suppressor. As far as the front grip, I wouldn't really focus on aiming stability, even though that does lead to more consistent recoil patterns. It's not actually going to help you with reducing the magnitude of the recoil. So I end up going with the stipple grip tape, but you could go with the rubberized as well. That's just really a matter of preference. I just chose one and I ended up going with stipple grip and I ended up liking that one perfectly fine. For the rear grip, I end up going with rubberized grip tape, but if you want a little bit faster aim down sight, I'd probably go with the stipple grip tape, or you can use the stipple grip tape to offset that Forged Tech Retribution if you want to combine it with the monolithic. So you got a little bit of pros and cons there, and that's going to kind of work out depending on what your individual preferences are. And then the Forged Tech comb is pretty much the only one here that's going to improve your aim down sight speed. This is what I would use when it comes to Warzone. If you're just trying to get the lowest recoil possible, like I said, you go to the compensator, go to the Forged Tech, you can go to the stippled rear grip, and then you can pretty much have a free attachment for whatever you want. So if you have a request for another weapon you'd like to see on the channel, definitely make sure you comment that down below. If you enjoyed the video or learned something new, please do me a favor by hitting that like button. And if you're brand new, looking to find your way back for more Call of Duty content, definitely consider subscribing with notifications on. Quick reminder, until June 24th, my Gfuel code is still 30% off. So you can either click the link down in the description or just use code JGOD at checkout if you're looking to restock or maybe try Gfuel for the first time. Appreciate all the support on the channel. Thank you for watching. As always, have a great day.